out of 16 hours, I would say probably 16 hours and 55 minutes we live in our ego self. Perhaps 5 minutes a day we are able to live in our, maybe we go to church on Sunday morning, then we are able to spend some more time. Now, as I mentioned, the true self is sad only for one reason. What is that reason? The ego can be sad. Suppose you lose your job, the ego is sad. You lose some money, the ego is sad. You have a problem, the ego is sad. You are going through some terrible problem in the family, the ego is... The ego can be sad for many, many reasons. But the true self is sad only for one reason. What is that? When you do not have enough of belongingness to God, you feel sad inside. I don't know about you. Do you sometimes have a prick of conscience? Do you have prick of conscience? When do you have this prick of conscience? When you do something bad. Now, who is pricking your conscience? Somebody is standing behind you, pricking your conscience when you do something bad. You know who pricks your conscience? It is your true self. The true self is the spirit inside of you, the spirit of God inside of you. You get a prick of conscience because the true self is telling you you're not doing what God is asking you to do. You are going away from communion with God. So the true self will prick you. If you don't have a prick of conscience, you are in a very bad situation. You have to talk. You have to meet me after this retreat. If you don't have a prick of conscience. But if you have a prick of conscience, it is good because the true self, God's Spirit is talking to you. Now, we all have this ego self and true self. I don't know, are you able to understand the difference between our ego self? Our ego self will tell us, you are what you do. You are what you have. You are what other people think or say about you. That is what our ego self says. And we want to satisfy our ego self, so we keep on doing and doing and doing, sometimes overdoing. Or we keep on having and having and having more and more in order to satisfy our ego. Or we go on impressing people and making people say great things about us. And we think that is what we are, but we are wrong. You are not what you do. You are not what you have. You are not what other people think about you and say about you. Then who are you? You are what God says who you are. The truth about you is that you are always in communion with God. You are always belonging to God. That's what the best definition of who you are is. You are a child of God. You are a precious son of God, a precious daughter of God. And that's why nothing will change that definition of you. Even if you don't do things, even if you don't have things, even if people say bad things about you, that will not diminish the value of who you are. You are a beloved child of God. This is the message of the Bible. I'm not making up some stories. What the Bible is teaching us, what Jesus came to preach, and what Jesus preached is the same, that you are a beloved child of God. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Now, it's not over. We have one more thing to say about. We also have a shadow self. I said we have an ego self. We have a true self. We also have a shadow self. These are three dimensions of our personality. Do you like your shadows? Do you see your shadows now and then? When do you see your shadow? Yes, I can see my shadow a little bit. we see our shadow? When we are in the presence of light. When we are in the presence of light, we see our shadow. I remember when I was going to school, when I was in the middle school, the school was very close to my home. Just 5 minutes away from home, close to our parish, was the school. So I used to go to school and come home during the lunch break, eat my lunch and go back to school in 5 minutes, 7 minutes. I used to run, eat something quickly and go back so that I could play more time with my friends. I remember those days, I used to be fascinated by my own shadow. When I go home for lunch, the shadow will walk with me. I used to run with my shadow. So whatever I did, the shadow used to imitate. When I raise my one hand, shadow also will do the same. When I start running, shadow starts running. When I start running fast, the shadow does the same. You know, when you are in the presence of light, you begin to see your shadow. You can never defeat your shadow. You can never outrun your shadow. The moment you take one foot, shadow also does the same. The shadow always walks with you. I know most of us came from India. You don't have many, only 3 or 4 of you are, I think, here. Most of us came from India, and those of us who came from India, and most of us came from one part of India, that is the state of Kerala. So if you don't know that, most of us are from one state. So when we boarded the plane to fly to the United States, did you and did I leave our shadow back in Kerala and board the plane? No. As soon as we boarded the plane, our shadows also boarded the plane. Now what do I mean by our shadow self? So many things. The shadow is that part of me that I hate in me. The shadow is that part of me that I am ashamed of myself in me. Shadow is that part of me that I feel guilty about. Shadow is my sin, my mistakes, my failures, and my weaknesses. My shadow is my wounds and hurts, painful and shameful memories of the past. All these together make up our shadow self. All of us have our shadows. And the shadows will always walk with us. Even when we come to church and sit here, the shadow also sits with us. The shadow shows up when we are in the presence of light. And that's when in the Bible, in the letter of St. James, chapter 1, we find, St. James tells us, God is pure light. God is pure light. That's why when we are in the presence of God, what comes first? Our shadows start showing up. When we are in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, when you sit down to pray, perhaps the first thing that comes to your mind, or my mind, is our own shadows, because we are in the presence of light. So what is our shadow self? Shadow self is that gray area of our life. Shadow self is the dark area of our lives. That part of me that I don't like about myself, that part of me that I reject in myself, that part of me that I deny in myself. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Is that making sense to you? Are we on the same page? Now, this is something very, very important for us to know from the Gospels. We all have our shadow self, but unfortunately, we are ashamed. We are feeling so guilty. We are very secretive about our shadows. We don't want anyone else to see our shadows. We don't want anyone else to see the stupid things, the dumb things that we have done in our lives. But that is our shadow. We cannot get rid of these shadows. Wherever we go, shadow follows us. You go to Africa, you go to Asia, you go to Europe, you go to South America, no matter where you go, the shadow will follow you. Now,